One of the hardest parts about getting started on your journey to being smarter with your money is just that, getting started. And one of the major reasons that people don't stick with their budget or paying off debt or saving money is because they don't know where they're starting from. So they can easily be overwhelmed when an automatic payment hits their credit card or a debt is sent to collections because they actually totally forgot about it. Don't let that be you. In this video, I'm going to walk with you through how you can figure out exactly where you are financially today, knowing all of your income, expenses, debts, savings, and investments. And we're all going to be able to see it on one simple sheet of paper. And at the end of this video, I'm going to give you 3 bonus tips that'll help you use this sheet of paper as a launching point to your smart financial journey. If we're just meeting, my name is Anthony, and I want to help you be smarter with your money so that you can live with less financial stress now and for the rest of your life. I met my now wife when I was in college in Virginia, and she was in Florida. And since we were long distance, we obviously wanted to travel to see each other as much as we possibly could. Now, we had plans to do that every 2 weeks, but we sat down and went through this process. We realized that if we continued to try to visit each other, first we wouldn't have enough money to do even that, but then I couldn't graduate or move down to Florida. So even though it was hard, because I knew where I was, I got a job, was able to graduate, move down to Florida, get another job, and then able to pay off over $20,000 in debt over the next year and a half. Now you can go through this process just on a normal lined sheet of paper, which is how I initially did it, but I actually have a Google Sheets document down in the description below. It'll be the first link that you can use to follow along and fill out there, or just print it out like I have printed here. But we're gonna be going through that document on my computer because it actually does some auto calculations for you and it's a little bit more helpful. And don't worry, that link is obviously completely free. As you can see at the top of the page here, we have our income, savings, and investments all laid out, and these are probably the easiest to figure out of these 5 categories, so you can go through those first. When you're looking at your income, you're only going to want to include what you actually get into your control. So that means net income, not gross income. So if you work for a company and they give you paychecks, if you've ever looked at one of your pay stubs, you probably see a bunch of different numbers and a bunch of different deductions from your paycheck. That's for things like taxes, health insurance, long-term disability insurance, or a 401k. So you're not going to worry about the top number, the biggest number on that pay stub. You're going to worry about the number after all those things are deducted, and that's the money that actually hits your bank account. So the first thing that we're going to put down is my wife's paycheck, because she gets paid from a company. There are a couple deductions, so this isn't actually her gross pay, but this is what we get control of every single month, which is $2,225. I could not say that for whatever reason. One other thing to note is that this is monthly numbers, so if you get paid twice in a month, you're going to want to double whatever your paycheck is. If you work for yourself or have a side hustle, you're also not going to include all of the revenue from that business on this income sheet. You're going to have things that you have to pay for out of the business for operating that business, and any money that you are taking out of the business, you should be withholding taxes on in a separate bank account. So since I now work for myself, my income is about $975 a month that we're taking out of my business, and Carissa also has a side hustle, and that brings us home about $175 per month. The total amount of our income is automatically calculated for us, which is $3,375. And that number, if you scroll down, actually gets put into the total income amount in our important numbers section, which is what we're going to get to at the end of this. After you're done figuring out your income, you can either go to your savings and investments or to your expenses. Nowadays, I always go towards my expenses first because I have them pretty well laid out because I've done this over and over again and I budget every single month. But if this is new for you, it might be easier for you to get the easy wins of figuring out your savings and your investments before you tackle your expenses, because those are a little bit easier to get done. So let's take a look at that savings portion of that sheet. If you're just starting out, you might not actually have a savings account now, and that's okay. You're just starting out. That section is just going to end up being blank for you. But if you do have a savings account, there are a couple of things that we should go over here. Don't include any money that's in a savings account if you plan to use it in the near future. So if you're saving to go on a vacation within the next couple of months, I don't know who's really going on a lot of vacations now, but if you're doing that, then don't put that in this savings section. Here are the things that you should be putting there. The first type of account that you should put there is an emergency or rainy day fund. This obviously isn't money that you're planning on using in the near future, so that's what I put first here. And the second type of savings account that I would put in this savings section is savings that you have for your long-term goals. Now, this could be a fund for a down payment on a house, to buy a car, or in our situation, to actually buy a van to turn into a house because we want to live in it for a couple of years. So that's the next part that we put in this section. And once again, the savings balance is calculated here and transferred to our important numbers section. Next, we're going to move on to investments. And this is actually a place that you might find some money that you didn't know you had. There are a bunch of different types of accounts that I would put here, but here are some of them that you might have. IRAs, 401ks, 403bs, HSAs, 529 saving plans for your kids, stock purchase plans at your employer, regular taxable brokerage accounts, or any properties that you own. Right now, we only have 2 Roth IRAs and a Roth 401k that I haven't yet rolled over from my previous employer, and so that's what we've put in our investment area. If you don't know any of the acronyms or types of accounts that I just said, you probably don't have them, but there are two that I would double check to make sure, because I've actually seen situations where people that I've worked with in the past have had money invested in these accounts and they didn't even know it. The first type of account is a 401k or a 403b if you work for a nonprofit. If your company offers one of these, you might have opted into it during your initial benefits enrollment period and kind of forgot about that if you don't look at your pay stubs all that often. So you might have been investing without even knowing it. And another situation where you might have money in a 401k or 403b is if your employer does a profit sharing distribution every year. I used to work for Enterprise Rent-A-Car, and while I was there, they did profit sharing distributions, and I had some of my employees and other coworkers who didn't even realize that they had money in their 401ks because they didn't contribute to their 401ks, but Enterprise did on their behalf because of a profit sharing distribution. Similar to this, you might have an HSA or a health savings account that your employer contributes to. If you haven't contributed anything to it, it's not likely that your employer has put money into it, but they may have. I have heard of that situation, I just don't know of it personally. If you don't know where these accounts might be, you can always reach out to your HR department at your work and they can help you figure out what companies have these investment accounts and then also how to figure out your logon credentials. The next part of this worksheet is figuring out your monthly expenses. And if you've never done this before, it can be a little daunting. I've laid out the general categories that I use when I'm budgeting and tracking my expenses here: giving, saving, housing, transportation, food, debt minimum payments, insurance, and personal or other expenses. But you can tweak this however you need to, and I do have a couple things that we should talk about as we're going over our expenses, but I'm just gonna fill mine in real quick so that we can look at that while we talk about it. First off, my expenses are not your expenses, so tweak this as much as you need to. It's just a general starting point to get you thinking if you've never done this before. Second, we're looking at things that are monthly expenses, so only put down things that are recurring, not any one-off expenses that you might have had this specific month. You'll be able to use this sheet later as an outline of a general budget and fill in the random monthly expenses that you have in any given month. Third, when we're looking at the savings category like I have down here, I don't have anything, and that's because I don't have any automated monthly savings. If you don't have any automated monthly savings either, don't put anything in this category. Fourth, in the debt section, only put who the debt is payable to and the minimum payments, not the total balance. Now, as you see, I put Apple and $100, and that has actually transferred down to the debt section, which we'll get to in a second. And that's because we're gonna fill out the rest of your debt information in that debt section. And if you make payments above your minimums, I still only recommend putting the minimum payments in that debt section because we're gonna get to what to do with that excess money here in a second. Fifth, if you don't know where to start, you can look at last month's spending and start to categorize it into these various categories and put buckets to everything that you spent money on. Or you can put an ideal or general budget, and then you can start working on that and holding yourself accountable to that starting this month. If you do the second option, don't be overly idealistic, but be realistic with your expenses. I know that if you're watching this video, you probably want to start being better with your money, and so you're gonna wanna cut back on some of your expenses, but don't over cut back in something like groceries where you actually need it. Cut back in the things that are more discretionary or that don't actually bring you the value that you want from them. The goal isn't to not be a spender, it's to be an intentional spender. Finally, it's okay to come back to this and continually adjust it. Managing your money is a lifelong process, and I've gone back to this and done it many, many times, and this doesn't look anything like it looked that first time that I sat down with my wife in college because life seasons change. If this is really stressing you out because you're overanalyzing everything, just set down a baseline and move on to the next section. You can always come back. Debt can be one of the most debilitating things to your long-term financial health. So let's get yours under control, and we're gonna move on to the debt section down here. As you can see, your debts will already be filled into this section, and so now all you'll have to do is add the total balance of the debt and the interest rate. So I'm gonna do that real quick with my one debt that I have, which is Apple, and the total balance right now is $2,300. And the interest rate is 0%. And that's because we financed the new iPhones on the Apple card at 0% over the next 24 months. And I actually have a video about that as well. Now, the one debt that you might have that might not be already pre-populated in this section is your mortgage expense. And that might be because you maybe put it in your housing expense rather than debt minimum payments. And that's okay, just add it to this section now. If this is your first time figuring out all this information, the way that you do it is to either go to the website of the creditor, so the bank or maybe the home loan company, or go to the statement that you last received in your mail or via email and look at that. And it'll show you your total balance and your interest rate. And you need all that information because when you're learning to tackle your debt, that's gonna be really important. Now, we're not gonna go over how to tackle the debt in this video, but that video is coming. But if you don't do this section, then it's gonna be a lot harder for you to actually pay off all of your debts in the smartest way possible. And if you are in the situation where you have a lot of different types of debt, I'm just gonna rattle off a bunch of different types of debts, and I'm sure that there's something that I'm not gonna name. And if you remember it, put it in the comments down below because maybe it'll help someone. You might have a car loan, a mortgage, tax debt, credit card debt, a 401k loan, personal loan, secured loan, home equity line of credit or a HELOC, medical debt, student loans, furniture loans, smartphone debt, payday loans, or family loans that you owe to a relative, not own. As you can see, when you figure all this out, the total balance is going to be calculated for you and then transferred into the important numbers section. And that's where we're moving on now, because this is actually a really important part of this worksheet that will show you exactly where you are pretty much in this one small square here. Now, the two bolded numbers here, monthly surplus and net worth, are going to be the numbers that show you exactly where you are today and how you're able to create a plan moving forward to get to where you want to be. Now, monthly surplus might not be something that you've thought about before, but it is the amount of income that you have beyond your normal monthly expenses. Essentially, you can do whatever you want with this money, but this is your wealth building money that you're gonna use intentionally to build wealth for yourself so that you can support your family and your community. If this number is negative, that means that right now you're living in an unsustainable way. Now, I'm not saying that to shame you at all, and you should have grace for yourself in this situation, but if that's the case, you can look back on your expenses, and even if it's not that case, you can probably look back on your expenses and find potential areas where you do have some discretionary spending that either doesn't bring you the value that you want it to, or you should sacrifice on right now in order to better your long-term financial health. You can also look at consolidating your debts so that you can have a lower monthly payment. And I don't say that so that you feel like you're doing something about your debt while not actually paying it off. I say that because if you can consolidate $500 in monthly payments down to $300 in monthly payments, then you might be able to get your surplus positive rather than negative. The other side of the coin is your income. And so maybe you need to find a better paying job or get a second job for a season, or find ways to make money online or through other means by reselling or starting your own side hustle. But I also know that it's not that simple for a lot of people, and saying find a job can be really insensitive, and I don't want it to come across that way. And honestly, I don't have all the solutions in this area, and it is just sometimes a really sucky situation. But I would love to do anything that I can to help. So if this is your situation, then reach out to me at Instagram at AMBDNZA, and I would love to find a time to be able to talk with you to potentially work through some angles that I've thought through that maybe you haven't, or just give you an ear to listen, honestly. The other important number in this important numbers section is your net worth. Now, this is not your worth as a person. It's just a number that shows you how much you own versus how much you owe. This is kind of the financial thermometer to see exactly where you are with your money now and how well you're doing. And if your number is negative, that's okay. When I started this whole process, mine and my wife's net worth was negative $20,000 2.5 years ago. Okay, I promised some bonus tips, and here they are. First, going back to talking about your income, if you're self-employed or have a side hustle, and you heard me say something about saving for taxes, and that kind of scared you because you haven't done that yet, here's my general easy rule of thumb, but obviously talk to a tax professional for what might be best for you. What I do is I save 40% of whatever I take out of my business and put that in a separate tax account. So if I take $1,000 out of my business and put it in my personal account, I'll put $400 into a tax account. That's because if you take $1,000 out of your business, your gross income isn't that $1,000, it's that $1,000 plus whatever taxes you owe. And obviously your situation will differ, so don't just take my word for it. Look into it yourself and talk to a tax professional. But I don't think I'll have to change doing this method until I'm taking out around 100 grand a year from my businesses. Second, if you have savings at a traditional bank, today, you should move that into a high yield savings account. You'll make a lot more money on it because if your money is just sitting at a brick and mortar bank, you're probably making between 0.01% and 0.1%. Whereas if you go to one of these high yield savings accounts, you can be making upwards of 0.5% to 1% and maybe even better in some of them. Now, if your balance is small, this might not be a lot of money in the grand scheme of things, but $10 is definitely more than $1, and having that 1 degree of removal from your regular checking account might be helpful for you if you're tempted to draw into that savings account whenever you have a little issue that you can actually figure out within your budget. I personally have accounts with Ally Bank, Yada Bank, SoFi Bank, Wealthfront, but I'm going to give you links to Ally, Yada Bank, and SoFi Bank down in the description down below. Ally Bank, I'm not affiliated with. Yada Bank, I do have an affiliate link, and it actually gives me tickets to their savings lottery. And then SoFi Bank, if you deposit $500, you'll get a $50 bonus, and I'll get a $50 bonus as well. You don't have to do any of that. It's just options for you. If you do go with SoFi though, they have the lowest interest rate as of right now, but Yada Bank is definitely the most fun because it's a savings lottery. The base rate is 0.3%, and it can go up from there if you win prizes in the app. Now third, the monthly surplus money that you have can easily be sucked down the vacuum of not having a plan for it. So if you're worried that that's gonna happen to you, in this video I go over exactly how to budget your money and create a spending plan that will help you to use that money in a more efficient way that actually helps you reach your goals rather than tempts you to make bad decisions. So click right there and I'll see you there.